The moon hung low over the marshlands of Morris Island, casting silvered shadows over the salt, stiff grass. Private Elijah Carter crouched behind a makeshift barricade of sandbags, the damp night air seeping through his thin uniform. Around him, the men of the 54th Massachusetts moved silently, rifles resting on knees, faces pale in the ghostly glow. Elijah pulled a tattered notebook from the inside of his jacket and traced a finger along the inked lines he had written earlier that day. Tomorrow we march into the belly of the storm. If I survive, I will see my brother again. If not, he closed it quickly, as if speaking the words aloud might summon death itself. A nearby voice whispered, "You sleepin', Carter?" Elijah turned. Corporal James Mitchell, a wiry man from Boston, with a scar along his cheek, leaned against a post. His grin was thin, almost a mask for the fear in his eyes. "Can't," Elijah replied, voice low. "Too much thinking. Too many ghosts." The camp was quiet, yet each man felt the pulse of the island. Cannons from the Confederate fort to the south occasionally thundered, distant yet undeniable reminders of the storm to come. The scent of salt, sweat, and gunpowder mingled in the heavy air. Elijah thought of his family, his mother, frail and worn by years of toil, and his brother Samuel, still enslaved on a plantation far inland. "If I fall tomorrow, it will not be in vain. I fight for them, for the promise of a life no longer bound by chains." Dawn came slow, swallowed by fog. The regiment formed lines on the sandy approach to Fort Wagner. Elijah felt the grit of sand beneath his boots, the heat of the sun beginning to pierce the early morning haze. "Men of the 54th, today we face the impossible." Captain Robert Shaw's voice rang out, steady, resolute. "We fight not just for the Union, but for the hope of every man who cannot yet lift his head in freedom." Elijah gripped his rifle tighter. Around him, soldiers whispered prayers, or cursed the fate that led them here. Private Thomas, a young recruit from Charleston, shivered. I thought it'd be easier," he muttered. Elijah clapped a firm hand on his shoulder. "Nothing worth fighting for ever comes easy, Thomas." The approach to the fort was a gauntlet of mud, water, and splintered wood. Every step brought them closer to musket fire, closer to the unknown. Each man bore his own fears, yet together they formed a fragile, determined shield. Through the mist, the outlines of Fort Wagner rose like a jagged tooth. Confederate soldiers patrolled the parapets, shadows moving with calculated menace. Cannon fire from the walls punctuated the morning fog, sending vibrations through the marsh. Elijah swallowed, the taste of salt and iron on his tongue. "This is it," he thought. "This is the line between survival and death." Corporal Mitchell nudged him. "Ready your courage, Carter. No one's coming to save us but ourselves." As they neared the outer trenches, Elijah caught a glance of the enemy. Faces hardened, eyes unyielding, a reflection of their own determination. The world seemed to narrow. The sand, the guns, the distant cries of men across the water. Every heartbeat sounded like a drum of war, loud and inevitable. That night, before the assault, Elijah found a quiet corner behind a toppled log. He pulled out his notebook once more and began to write. "Dear Samuel, if you ever read these words, know that I carry you with me, in every step, in every breath. The world is cruel, but we are more. We are more than chains, more than fear. If I fall for our freedom, for our mother, for you." Nearby, Private Lewis hummed softly, a lullaby from home, a ghostly counterpoint to the distant drum of artillery. The men of the 54th tried to find normalcy, a thread of humanity amid the looming storm. Elijah finished the letter, folding it carefully. He tucked it inside his jacket. Tomorrow he would face the fort. Tomorrow the marsh would be a battlefield. And yet, tonight, in the dark, he allowed himself a sliver of hope. Hours before the assault, Elijah took his position at the edge of the trenches, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Shadows shifted across the fort's walls, every movement a threat. A single torch flickered in the distance. "Do you think we'll make it?" Thomas whispered behind him. Elijah did not answer. The weight of the question was heavier than any musket. He only nodded toward the fort, where the night seemed alive with menace. Each echoing footstep a reminder that tomorrow would change everything. As the night stretched on, he felt a strange calm settle over him, a fragile, tense calm that precedes the storm. Somewhere in the distance, a cannon fired, a solitary sound that shattered the stillness. Elijah's grip tightened on his rifle. This is it. Tomorrow we write history. The first light of dawn bled across the marsh, painting the sky in muted shades of crimson and gray. Elijah's regiment assembled at the base of the sandy incline leading to Fort Wagner. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of wet earth and gunpowder heavy in every breath. Captain Shaw stood at the front, his expression grave but unwavering. "Men," he said, voice carrying across the still morning, "today we show the world what courage looks like. Today we fight not for glory, but for justice, for freedom, and for each other. Forward!" A collective murmur rose from the men, a mixture of fear and resolve. Elijah's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a drum of defiance. He glanced at Mitchell, whose eyes mirrored his own tension. Together, they took the first step, boots sinking into the wet sand, rifles steady in their hands. As they advanced, the fort erupted. Cannons thundered, musket fire shattered the morning calm, and the cries of men echoed across the marsh. The incline to the fort became a gauntlet. Each step forward, a battle against gravity, mud, and death itself. Elijah stumbled, catching himself on a jagged wooden stake. Around him, comrades fell, some screaming, some silent, all reminders of the peril that awaited them. Yet he pressed on, driven by the thought of Samuel, of freedom, of the promise he had made to his family. "Keep moving," shouted Shaw, charging ahead with the regiment. "No retreat." Elijah felt the heat of fear and courage intertwining, a combustible fire that carried him forward. Every face around him told a story. The young recruit from Charleston, the veteran from Boston, the men who had known chains and now knew the taste of choice. Reaching the base of Fort Wagner, Elijah paused for a fleeting moment to catch his breath. The walls loomed above, imposing and unyielding. Confederate soldiers manned the parapets, their eyes sharp, their rifles ready. Corporal Mitchell leaned close. "This is it, Carter. No turning back." Elijah nodded. He could see the sweat on the young soldiers' faces, the determination etched into every line. He adjusted his grip on his rifle and began the climb, boots digging into sandbags and earth, hands trembling but firm. The sounds of battle were all around, shouts, musket fire, cannon roars. But in that moment, a strange clarity washed over him. He was not just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something larger than himself, something eternal. In the midst of chaos, Elijah found fleeting moments of humanity. A wounded soldier cried out for water, and another, barely able to stand, shared his meager rations. They were not just soldiers. They were men, bound by fear, hope, and a fragile camaraderie that made the impossible feel possible. Elijah caught sight of a torn letter, fluttering in the wind, words he could almost read. "If I survive, I will see you again." It reminded him of his own letter to Samuel. The thought of home, of freedom, of love and family steeled his resolve. He whispered a silent prayer, not for himself, but for those he loved and those who could not fight beside him. Let us live. Let this not be the end. Hours passed like minutes. The regiment, battered but unbroken, held their ground against relentless fire. Elijah's rifle cracked repeatedly, each shot a desperate plea for survival, each breath a testament to courage. A sudden cheer from the parapets above indicated a small breach. Shaw led a squad through, and Elijah followed, heart hammering, mud and blood mixing on his uniform. He felt fear, yes, but also exhilaration, the terrifying beauty of defiance, of standing against impossible odds. He glanced down at the marsh behind them, where the fog still clung to the earth like a protective shroud. How many would return? How many would write letters home that night, telling stories of valor and sorrow intertwined? The sun had climbed higher when the firing subsided. Smoke curled into the sky, the fort scarred but not fully conquered. Elijah leaned against the battered wall, exhaustion weighing every limb. Yet a spark of triumph ignited in his chest. They had survived, and they had made a statement, bold, unyielding, unforgettable. Around him, comrades shared quiet words, some laughing, some weeping, all alive. Mitchell clapped him on the shoulder. "We did it, Carter. Against everything. We did it." Elijah nodded, eyes distant. Thoughts of Samuel filled him again, the family he longed to reunite with, the freedom still not fully won. This battle is only one step. One day, we will see the chains broken completely. As night fell over Morris Island, the regiment gathered near a dwindling fire. Letters were written, whispered stories shared, eyes reflecting the dancing flames. In the quiet, Elijah opened his notebook once more. "We survived the impossible today. But the war is not over. Freedom is a path, not a place. Tomorrow we march. Tomorrow we fight. Tomorrow we live or we die trying. Samuel, I will come for you. I promise." A distant cannon echoed across the water, a reminder that danger still lingered, that history was not yet fully written. Elijah folded the notebook, letting it rest against his chest. He looked at the stars above, faint and cold, and felt the weight of the world pressing against him, but also the hope that one day the darkness would lift. And perhaps, in that light, they would all find the freedom they had been fighting for. The night whispered, carrying both dread and promise. And somewhere in the shadows of Fort Wagner, the story of courage, hope, and the relentless pursuit of freedom continued.